Welcome to the Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into education to help optimize your performance. And today I have a special guest with me who I guess I could say I'm emotionally attached to a certain degree. We've talked about being emotionally attached to diets and emotionally attached to fitness programs. But someone who started out literally as an online client, not knowing him, from anyone, has become, a really good friend of mine to this day, Mr. Dennis.
Mr. Mullins.
I'm afraid I'll
Pleasure to
mess
be
up the
here.
last. I'm afraid I'll mess up the last name, right? So McLaughlin, right?
Yeah, it's only been 7 years. Still can't get the last name right. It's all right. I'll give you a pass at this point, buddy.
Well, it's sorry, it is still. Here you go. Oh no, I updated it. You must have, or the iPhones are doing updates now, so I actually have your name.
Right. I know. I had to do it for you because I knew in your phone I was like Dennis Mick, and just like the rest of the name was just too much. It was too much for you, so you had to drop it. I get it.
Listen, I am not I am not the best when it comes to this pronunciations. There we go, of names.
That was perfect right there. You
Right.
just
Like I
said it
grew up when
all.
there was Johns and Sarahs and Bobs. Okay. Now we're getting all these like cool names that people have, and I'm like, I'm sorry. You know, like let me stay in this protein, carbohydrate, fat,
Right.
and exercise, lane. Let me stay in this lane. I'm pretty good at it. You get me outside of it, and I'm not very good.
I get you.
There there is a reason that the tool bag in my house is purple.
That's true. That's true. And I've met your wife. I can attest
She,
to her skill
she,
set.
she handles most of the stuff. But hey, guys, a little bit of background on Dennis, and Dennis, I'll have you give, kind of background on yourself, father, kids, and what you do. But, background from my standpoint with you is, you were my first ever winner, inside of the first form game, right? And, I like to point that out, in the sense of, yes, I was training people, before that. I was a personal trainer. I worked with people, from a nutritional standpoint. Had tons of people lose over 100 pounds, did bariatric, started CrossFit gym. So it's not like Dennis was my first quote unquote client, but he was my first client that won, anything within the first form world, right? And then now that is, my primarily, you know, what I focus on. That is a big part of my life. It's going to continue to be a big part of my life. And you're kind of the first in that, right? And now we've had, to be honest, like I've lost count because I started counting the ones for the S2 competition too. And we're either at 31, 32, or somewhere in there, right? Like I'm going to have to go back and look at it, from that standpoint. But technically, you were two, right?
Wasn't I one?
Well, I mean, you were one, but you
Yeah.
won twice. So
Oh, yes, I did win twice. I was going to say, because you never forget your first, Jeremy. I
never.
don't care how many came after me and are going to keep coming, but I can always sort of be the number one. So I can't get dethroned that way.
You were the best. That's what I always tell people. I am the best dietitian in the National Guard.
And the only.
I'm the only one, but hey, let's not go there. And and I say this because, guys, it is something that I have learned, and for me, being overweight growing up, I think this is just a passion of mine, is helping people within fitness, right? Whether it's a curse or not, because unfortunately, sometimes, I don't look for the bad in people. I don't see the bad in people, which sometimes gets me in trouble. Like I always look for the good, right? And I'm always, in the sense I want to help people. And I remember the first gentleman that I trained, personal training. His name is Kevin Henchman, and he is still a good friend to this day. His wife is my accountant. They are still they're such good family friends that our kids call him Papa Kevin, right? Like, because we've maintained relationships over the years. And that's what I like to do, right? And some people's relationships that I work with are not going to be on the level that yours and mine are on. Like it's just, that is the truth, but that's the way I always treat people when I work with them. And it was the same way with you. I remember starting out, just you were a middle-aged gentleman on the app, middle-aged then, you're a little older now. And you were very analytical in your thought process, And I remember having to give a little bit of tough love in the beginning of like, stop overthinking this.
Guilty as charged. I did, and I did take that tough love. I was green as grass when I came in too, man. I don't know if you remember, like I didn't know what a macro was. Like I had never heard of what that, I didn't even know that like the grams equated to calories. Like I knew, when I say I knew nothing, I knew nothing. And so then when I started to get a little bit of knowledge, I'm like, okay, well, now I have to ask 1,000 questions so that I can know everything. And you were just like, listen, man, like, why don't you just focus on the basics and we'll deal with the rest of this stuff another time.
Yeah.
And so you kind of put me in my place, and then with a kind wording there, but it worked, and I stopped sort of over analyzing everything and just whatever Jeremy said, that's what I'm going to do.
And I remember, and what we're going to talk about, the intent of the podcast, guys, is tell some funny stories, but also like the intent today that I want people to realize, you lost it. This is where it's all fuzzy. It's been 7 years. It gets fuzzy.
Yeah.
It was 80 some pounds.
85. Yeah, it was 85. Yeah.
So we lost 85 pounds along his journey. And we set a physical goal, right? And that is something that I like to do. And it is a tool in my toolbox when I work with a lot of individuals that come to me, right? Because when we start working, especially fat loss, when you have that 40, 60, 80 or more pounds to lose, no matter what people say, the scale matters.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it can either make your day or break your day. You
100%.
doing everything right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we can talk about inflammation. I can talk about, hey, let's focus on progress photos. Let's focus on measurements. Let's focus on, getting that body fat test done, your performance. You can say all that stuff and lay it out there. But unless you've been, once again, overweight, you don't understand that scale is going to matter for a while. So what I try to do as people get closer to their goal weight is have them focus on something physical, right? And that's going to kind of be the intent of today. And I'm going to have Dennis back on because, to be honest, like to tell his full story, we would be over our 20 or 30-minute time cap that we try to keep our podcast from that standpoint. So without further ado, just give a little bit of history, of yourself, what you do, kind of where you're at today, and then we'll kind of get back into that, year-long progress, going from starting weight, losing 80 pounds, doing our 100-mile but mountain bike ride, and then tossing on the Ironman after that.
Yeah. So Dennis McLaughlin, I am about to turn 48. So I'm staring down the barrel of 50 at this point. But when I live in the DC suburbs and father of four. I've got a kid at every school level. I've got a college kid, a high school kid, a junior high kid, and an elementary school kid. So 4 boys and a little girl is the youngest. So live here in Virginia with my wife. Born and raised in Virginia. Spent most of my life here. I am a CFO of a payments technology company. So busy career, busy job. Always kind of been in the kind of corporate world and had busy roles. And when I found First Form and the Transformation Challenge, it was 2017. So I like to say it's my second birthday. So January 17th, 2017 was when I entered the first Transformation Challenge way back then. And so I was 40 at the time. And was close to 280 pounds, and just decided to commit myself to a year. As I said before, and I know we'll get into it, like didn't know anything about anything, but just knew I had been heavy for certainly most of my adult life, and just was kind of at midlife and needed to make a change. And I don't want to sort of skip to the end here, but it was just the best decision I've ever made, and really was the first time that I kind of really found success in sort of all the downstream things that came along with that, over the course of that kind of year-long journey. So,
well, and I want to pull something out of that so people understand this. Your a main guy in what you do, right? You're a point person inside of your business. You are very intellectual. And I made the joke earlier on numbers. You guys can see with his profession why he wanted to know everything once I started talking numbers inside the macro world. He was wanting to know everything. And I was just like, Dennis, protein and calories. Protein and calories, please focus on this. And this was like in January of that year, right? So that was early on in the process. But I want people to understand that you can be the top of the echelon or the tip of the spear inside your profession. And I made this joke earlier, and I'm okay with it, right? I'm okay with not knowing, maybe how to do X or Y or Z around the house, right? Because I put all of my time and effort in the last 2 decades of learning everything I can in sports nutrition, fat loss, and fitness, so I can become the best in this arena, right? And I'll be the first one to admit I'm not very good in those other arenas. But I think this is where a lot of people are not humble enough. Like when they're starting their journey, they're fearful to fail and to start because they don't know anything. And then maybe they think that they should, and maybe that they're at this high level over here, but it's okay not to know things over here.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, I would tell you this, just the nature of my personality and my kind of career life, I definitely fell into that category for, kind of just most of my life, and really kind of coming into this was really the first time. And I had, kind of the same thought, after even, despite me asking a lot of annoying questions, I did realize pretty quickly, like, for really kind of one of the first times in my life, like I'm going to have to sort of just surrender my ego. And the way I looked at it was, I was 40 years old. I was really heavy. I had kind of been heavy, and I had done the classic, lose 20 pounds, gain 30, and lose 30, gain 40. And I'd done that yo-yo like so many people have done. And my thought process was basically one of like, you've tried this on your own. You've tried this, so many times and haven't had success. Like, that approach isn't working. So maybe let's try, kind of surrendering, getting a little uncomfortable, and realizing that, like, you don't have all the answers, and like, let's try a different path. And entering the contest itself was a big part of that as well. And so, like, in addition to just sort of surrendering to kind of listening to an expert, which was you, also just kind of getting out of my comfort zone in terms of entering the contest.
It broke up a little bit. Can you say that? Can you say that last part? Listening to what was I?
I I don't remember. I'm drawing a blank on what I said. Yeah, this will be one of the few times I actually, admit that, like, my man here is a bit of an expert in this department. The results show that he kind of knows what he's talking about. I guess I can sort of begrudgingly admit that.
Okay, that came through clear. We're good.
Okay, we don't need another take.
Now, we talked about, in the beginning, and that's another thing that stands out. And I'm pretty sure the YouTube video is still out there that people can, find, and I'll make sure that we link that in the show notes. But I remember your initial video to enter the challenge and to paint a little bit of history. Dennis entered the My Transformation Challenge before we had the first format.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, then it was just kind of a website. And I actually did my education in a Facebook group, right? So I'd have, I still have the Facebook group to the day that I put education in, but not as much, because we were able to educate inside the app. And I remember that video. It was, you kind of look back at it and it makes sense. And what I mean by that, like, the light, it's dark. I want to say that you had a hoodie on. It was almost like you did not want to be on camera. You didn't want to be seen in that state of, hey, I need help. I want to make a change, and it's cool to see that video and to think about, like, okay, where you're at today and the things that you accomplished today.
Yeah. I mean, when and I think people who have struggled with their weight can really relate to this. I mean, it's it becomes almost sort of a second nature feeling where, like, you're embarrassed, because people who are overweight, and it's not that they don't know. I mean, they know, and it's just, and they have that sense of sort of embarrassment that, whether it just in general. And so then, like, sit in front of a camera and admitting that like you got to make a change, like that's hard to do. But it was all kind of in that theme of like getting myself out of my comfort zone and trying a new approach and saying, all right, like, you know, the tenets of this challenge say, you know, make a video and talk about your story. I'm like, okay, like, and really kind of getting vulnerable was not something that I was very good at or very accustomed to at the time. And but was super necessary. And you're right, like it's cool to look back on that now and kind of remember that and sort of see, you know, that was kind of, you know, what day, and I'm really thankful that I did it. And I would encourage folks, if you know, if whatever journey you're going on, like even if you never share it with anybody, like doing those kinds of documentation videos and things, like it's so easy to forget. And just it's great to look back and go like, all right, that's where it all started. And kind of just, you know, remember. And it's a proud thing to kind of move from there to here.
Yeah, and one thing that I like to do with the podcast is not, you know, I know a lot of podcasts out there, they just sit and talk and it's great stories and all that, but I like to give action items. And that would be one that I would tell people like, hey, I get it. If you're not in the app with me or you're not on the app, you know, the first one app period, that's okay. Take photos. Even if
Yeah.
you don't share them with anybody, take them for yourself. That way you have them, you know, and you can go back and look at them, right?
Right.
Because we are our worst enemies. Okay. Listen, I got this little double chin that when I first gain weight, I've got a double chin, like it's there, right?
Yeah.
It's on YouTube. Okay. That's the first place I always look inside of photos. Inside, anytime I see a picture of myself, I'm like, what does the double chin look like? I'm not looking at like, you know, okay, I've got veins in my quads now because I've been riding my bike a little bit. I'm leaning out. I'm looking good. No, I'll look at the double chin. You do that too,
Oh,
right?
totally.
Everybody does it. We have this
Yep.
problem area versus what I teach individuals to do is like, hey, look at left shoulder to left shoulder, look at left, you know, hip to left hip. You kind of analyze it and you're like, oh man, that is a big difference. And there was something else you said that I want to bring up and get your take on it, because when people are overweight, I think that one of the biggest things that happen inside of these challenges, and when I say challenges, I'm just using our challenge as a given period of time to chase results. So we'll say health journey. When someone starts their health journey, it's almost like they already give up on their self. When that first obstacle comes up, they don't overcome it, right? And they say, well, I knew I couldn't have success. So speak a little bit to that, and then maybe to what that was, that first obstacle, like big obstacle that you came to that year that you overcame and realized like, you know what? Yes, I can have success. I got past this issue, right? I got past this obstacle. I can do this.
Yeah. So you're 100% right. And like, I think part of the accountability, I knew how my brain worked at the time. And I knew that, you know, like a lot of people, if you kind of give yourself an out and really kind of, you know, giving yourself an out at those stumbles kind of gives yourself an excuse like, I knew I couldn't do it. I knew it wasn't for me. I knew in my case, like the story I heard and told myself most of my life was like, I'm just a big guy. Like I'm just a big guy. I'm supposed to be big. And so, you know, it's just how it's supposed to be. And so like, you know, at the first stumble, I could easily sort of kind of gravitate to that and say, oh, well, you know, there it is again. There's just another validation of what was already in my head. And so one of the ways that I, you know, kind of took action to sort of almost protect myself from myself was, I mean, the challenge was a big part of that because at the time we didn't have the app, but in concept, it worked the same way. You just uploaded your photos into a website, and I had joined your Facebook group at the time. And what I told myself was, okay, no matter what, like I can't have my pick. I'm not going to not put in pictures, and every picture has to be a little bit better than the last one. And so where I ran into the potential where I was kind of could go off the rails, and it kind of goes back to something you said earlier in this podcast, is just that number on the scale. And so like in the beginning, you know, the number wasn't moving a whole lot. And that's what sort of generated all the questions. And I'm not doing this right. And it's not working for me, et cetera, et cetera. And like, you know, there was a part of you kind of talking me off the ledge was just kind of trust the process, you know, mantra that, you know, you use a lot. and that was something that I wasn't very good at. And so it took sort of real willpower to me go like, there's no part of me that enjoys trusting the process. Like I want to know and I want to just like be certain. And so like having that sort of leap of faith and saying, all right, well, I'm going to just heads down, trust the process. And that was going to be the way, because I would go a week, 2 weeks, and the number would either not move or go up. And I'm like, I'm clearly doing something wrong. And that was the thing that was going to derail me if we didn't. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna reach out to this guy and I'm gonna ask him what's going on, and he's gonna and like it was just the trust the process, just keep on, it's gonna happen, trust me, trust me, trust me. And like that was the way that I kind of overcame it, is just deciding that even though at the time I didn't believe you, I was like, because everybody thinks that like they're special, like, oh no, you don't know my situation, I'm a little bit different, blah blah blah. Like I said, okay, like no matter what, I'm just gonna trust and like see, and worst case, if it really doesn't work out, I can go back to this guy and go like, hey, you were wrong. Like I really am different, and see it didn't work. But of course I was wrong, and the wheels started moving as you said they were going to.
Well, and that's a great, transition, because I always tell people, and I post this almost every, quarter, within the challenges. And it's the Days of Thunder, YouTube clip or clip of, basically saying, hey, I need you to go out and run 50 miles your way and then give me 50 miles my way.
Right.
And that's what I ask a lot of people is like, hey, give me a challenge. Give me 2 months my way. Okay. And the reason I say that is because what you said is so important on the scale. When you're 40, 60, 80, 100 pounds overweight, and you're not doing these things of walking every single day, drinking enough water, optimizing your sleep, hitting your protein number, right? Your body is not a fine-tuned, for lack of better words, machine, right? So what happens in the beginning, the body has to adapt a lot, to this process, right? And I've talked a little bit of this in the other podcasts, like, resistance training is going to allow the muscle cells to uptake a little bit more carbohydrate, right? The more carbohydrate we can store as muscle glycogen, the more water that we have, right? When you start increasing water intake from not drinking enough water, the body's like, what are you doing? I got to get rid of this. I'm not used to this. So that affects the scale. So yes, there's so much going on, when you come in a detrained or an unhealthy state versus starting to do all those good things, right? And a lot of people don't see really good progress in that first month, right? And you were one of those individuals. And I can say this, you can go to my Instagram and look at, Kevin and Adam, guys, a couple of people I've posted here recently, same way there. They only lost 4 pounds, I think, in January of last year. And both these gentlemen went on to lose over 100 pounds in the year, right? So people have to trust the process, that scale may or may not change in the beginning, but it's almost like, and I know you're going to love this, it's almost like compounding interest though, right? You're doing all that work, all that effort, and then it catches up, right? And that's what happened to you. Once we got into months, 2, 3, and 4, then we just started consistently dropping at that game, or at that time point.
Yeah. And that's where like kind of being patient at the beginning, and then eventually when it starts happening, then and I know this is, I'm going to borrow another one of your phrases here, that kind of the little snowball starts to get a little bit bigger as it's rolling down the hill. And then, once you kind of get a little bit of momentum, it doesn't make it easy per se, but it's easier because you're saying, all right, well, like I've done it this way so far and it's worked so far. And then, eventually you can hit little like brick walls and such. And then just, you get a lot more confident in the adjustments that, you work together to kind of make. Cause you're like, okay, well, like he was right so far, then whatever adjustment we're making, it's gonna get things moving again. And so, no, yeah, totally. And the momentum, then, you can kind of ride that wave a little bit.
Awesome. And guys, the other thing that I like to do, and the point of today's, and in the education of today's podcast, is when you're along your journey, there's a certain point that I really want to start looking at something physical. Okay. And this is a personal preference. Like I have no data, research, or anything behind this. Okay. But I am a big fan of endurance sports for middle-aged people, right? And what I mean by that is they're relatively safe, right? I get it. There's a lot of people who like CrossFit competitions. There's a lot of people that, maybe like powerlifting competitions. I get that. I am not saying that, you have to do endurance events to have success long term. I just like to recommend people to look at things like, 10K, half marathon, marathon, events, because it gives you something to train for, right? It gives us something to train for. And I think there's a lot of correlation between putting in the time and effort to do an Ironman or whatever the case may be in life, especially along the wellness journey. So what we did was, and I can't remember if was it the first time that I met you when we did the 100 miler, like in person?
That was no, because we met at Summer Smash. So
Okay.
we met at Summer Smash, but that was the second time we had hung out was the bike ride.
Okay.
Because we went at Summer Smash in June or July, and then we did the bike ride in like August or something like that.
Yeah. Now I'm getting really old, right? Because I was then the third time was it the mountain biking that winter? Because I was trying to figure out the mountain bike.
Yes. The mountain biking, then after the end of the year, we did a
Gotcha.
mountain bike ride with
Okay.
you, me, and Dave, and I can't remember Matt, I think.
Yeah.
So
I forgot Summer Smash, so it could have been because of the coffee that I was drinking at Summer Smash. Maybe I just didn't remember, it.
yeah, you actually, I don't know if you remember, you had a broken arm that one. Yeah, your arm in a sling and a big old brace.
That is right. It was the year. It was the year I fell off my mountain bike
Yep.
and had to have the surgery.
Yep.
Yes, I do remember now. But what we transitioned from, so along Dennis's journey, okay, just letting the listeners so you could think about it, right? Because a lot of people right now, this is the end of January. This should drop, fairly soon, maybe 1st of February when this drops, or the end of January. A lot of people are in this case right now. Like maybe they've only lost, which still is a good loss, 2 or 3 pounds this month. That's still good. We are building that snowball, like you said, right? We're going to ready to start making adjustments. That compounding interest is going to happen. We're going to start losing faster. But there will become a point in everyone's journey that we do need to focus on something other than the scale, right? And I love making that a physical event. So your first physical event was a 100-mile ride, right? Mm-hmm. In West Virginia, on the Greenbrier River Trail, so which was supposed to be flat, but
yeah,
it felt like it was up. It was like a story of our grandparents, right? It was uphill both ways.
Right. Yeah, we get on there, and Mullins is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're flat here, and it was an out and back, and so we kind of went out, and it was just like, I mean, it wasn't like up, but it was just enough of a grade where you were like, I think we're going uphill. And if you look at the elevation chart afterwards, literally the first 50 miles was just this steady burn
gradually
up. And then,
you're going up river, so it was just a gradual quote unquote climb.
Right.
But then you were so tired coming back that it felt like a climb on the way back.
Yes.
And it was a good point, because the reason I did that, I remember just, thinking through it from a coaching standpoint, was I wanted you to focus on something physical. I wanted to get away from the scale, especially that last quarter of that year, because you were fairly lean, right? And we didn't have a lot of weight to lose going into the last quarter of that year. So we really just, I started focusing on, okay, hey, let's focus on some physical events, from that. But talk a little bit how that maybe relieved a little bit of anxiety, or relieved a little bit of stress in the mind of, okay, now, hey, I've got to go out and ride, 20 miles. I got to ride 30 miles. I got to work this up to be able to accomplish this 100 miles, and how that gave you a new focus in your journey.
Well, I think you nailed it. It was a new focus. And so up until that point, when you're still when you're in the beginning, when you're kind of learning, how to track macros, and you're watching the scale, and you're just sort of being really kind of dialed in with your diet and kind of learning how to do that, it takes a lot of your attention. But then, everybody, like normal people, will find a way to kind of make that a habit, and they'll get into a routine. And so by kind of throwing out the challenge around a 100-mile bike ride, I still remember it was, the exchange went something like, hey, you should do a 100-mile bike ride and I'll do it with you. And like, it wasn't really asking, it was just like, this is what you're going to do. And I'm like, okay, like, this is what I'm down. And so training for it up until that point, to your point, like gave me something to focus on, because now, in addition to keeping my diet dialed in and kind of just staying on track from the food standpoint, now I had a thing, like I had a goal to focus on and say, okay, and whatever date it was, I'm meeting up with Jeremy and we're going to go ride 100 miles, and I better be ready for it, or else, I'm going to look like an idiot when I have to tap out and, at mile 60 or whatever. And so, focusing on that goal, and having that be another thing to kind of occupy some of my brain, kind of help keep things fresh and allowed to kind of stay engaged in the process. Because I mean, a year is in some ways a short period, but in some ways, like, it can be monotonous if all you're doing is the same thing week in, week out, day in, day out, and there's no other thing to focus on. It can kind of become a little bit, mundane. And so, it was a great kind of, I don't want to say distraction, but it was a great new thing to focus on, more so than a distraction per se.
Man, and you nailed it, right? Because you just said it, like, a year is short relative, but it's long to do the same thing. But here I am asking people to go out and do the same thing for the rest of their life on this health journey, right? I'm asking you to, like, hey, eat healthy, right? Eat this way, walk every day, do your resistance training. Like, that becomes very boring to a degree, right? Because it's the same stuff, but we have to perfect the simple stuff, right? But I did this on the very first podcast. I talk about changing habits. You have to change your identity to fit that. And you didn't become a cyclist, right?
Nope.
I would argue you didn't become a triathlete. Even though you've done some Ironman, and we haven't talked about this yet, right? We're doing Ironman again this year. We're going to Ironman Florida, both Dennis and I. We did that one together. Once again, we're old. 2 years ago,
2021,
okay.
Yeah.
And then we did your very first Ironman in Maryland in 2019.
19. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And the story, we should talk about the story of how that one came to be in a minute.
Well,
so
yeah, we'll wrap up with that, right?
All right.
But the point I want people to understand with this is, like, hey, when I'm going to teach this, right? Especially if you're working with me on the app in coaching. Once I get you down to close to your goal weight, we're going to focus on something physical, right? Because I think it's very important. We can learn a lot from it. But what I want you to realize is, if you go out and run a marathon, it's okay to not become to not have the identity that you're a runner, right? But you need to have the identity that you are a healthy person. And then that healthy person is going to pick something else that they're going to go do, which might not be a marathon. Cool. Got you. You don't have to become a runner where all you do is run, right? That's okay too. It's okay to have an identity as a runner, because then every time you run, it makes you feel good, right? So now, like, every time you're training for an event, and this is the cool thing, we're doing the same thing, right? 7 years later, right? There's a little bit of stress on both of us that we've signed up for this event at Ironman Florida. We're not going to show up, out of shape, right? Now, our training programs might look a little bit different, but that's okay.
That's for damn sure. That should be another episode in the future, just the difference in how Jeremy Mullins trains for an Ironman and how Dennis trains for an Ironman, but we'll leave that for another day. I agree with everything you said. I would add to the end of that is, that whatever that physical goal is, like, you're kind of on the right track when the challenge is kind of laid out to you and it, like, makes you a little nervous. I mean, it should be something that you can't go out and do tomorrow. And it's something that, like, maybe you've thought about, maybe you haven't, but you kind of, when at the prospect of it, you're like, all right, like, I got to work to be able to do that. And that sort of creates the new journey that then will create the new accomplishment, which will create a win. And even if you're not identifying, if you do a marathon, to use your example, like, you may not identify yourself as a runner, but you've identified yourself as someone who can kind of pick something really hard and go after and do it and accomplish whatever that thing is for you.
And that bleeds over into life,
right?
Whether you have the goal of, hey, I want to retire a millionaire, whether you have the goal of, hey, I want to be, the next CEO, whatever the case is, right? It bleeds over into life. But let's wrap up with it. You wanted to talk about it, how did Ironman Maryland become a thing?
Yeah, so it was really a bit of, I think this is the proper use of the term, is a little bit of serendipity, but so it was post 2017, post the weight loss. I got flown out to HQ, First Form HQ, and did kind of a photo shoot and some video and all that kind of fun stuff. And as luck would have it, there was a storm back in Virginia when I was supposed to fly home. So my flight home got canceled. So I literally am leaving the airport and I'm texting Sal and saying, "Hey, my flight got canceled." And so stayed another night, ended up the next day going to lunch with Sal and Brian Teach and some of the other guys. And as Sal is one to do, Sal starts running his mouth a little bit about some challenge that he wants to take on, which I want to make sure. I hope he hears this, so please make sure he listens to this episode.
Make sure to tag him in this one.
I will, yeah, for sure. And so like we're sitting around having lunch, having a good time, and Sal starts going, "We're all going to do a full Ironman, and you're going to do it with us." And then he FaceTimes you or sends you a video message, and he's like, "Hey, look what I'm here with. We're all going to do a full Ironman. We're all going to do it." And you're like, "Cool." And I'm like, and so I was like, at that point, like on the spot, committed to it right then. So this is early 2018. And we were going to do a full Ironman in 2019. He's like, "We're going to do it next year." Okay. And like at the time, mind you, I had not swam really ever. And so, proceeded to commit to something I didn't fully understand. I had done a 100-mile bike ride. I had never run more than a half marathon. And so like these aspects of this challenge were sort of daunting to me. And I didn't really know what I was signing up for. But over the course of the year and a half between the committing, which was sort of early 18, and the event, which was September, I believe, of 19, learned to swim. So humbled myself and got my kids' swim team coach to say, "Hey, will you give a grown man one-on-one swim lessons and teach me how to swim?" So did that and trained just a little bit more than you, I believe, ahead of that event. And we went and we did it. And as if an Ironman wasn't hard enough, for folks who can look this up, in the Chop Tank River in Maryland, it empties into the bay. And ordinarily you wouldn't find jellyfish in a river,
No.
but when it empties into the bay, the jellyfish find their way into the Chop Tank. And so Jeremy and I are getting ready to go swim for 2.4 miles, and there is a flood of jellyfish. And so not just one sting, every part of your skin that is exposed got stung. So in addition to swimming 2.4 miles, which is hard enough, we had the pleasure of being stung by jellyfish literally the entire time.
It's so ingrained in my mind. If I go to an aquarium with kids and there's jellyfish, I take photos and message Dennis. Like it is a thing that we do, because it wasn't just like one or two.
Oh no.
You see a jellyfish and you're like, "Oh, jellyfish." It was, I guess there's schools of them. I guess you could call it school.
I guess.
Correct terminology. You didn't just hit one. Like you just swam through multiple ones. As it was bad.
It was bad. And you just had to accept the fact that you were just going to get torn up. And so we got out and they're spraying us all with vinegar. And so that was quite the adventure. And so, we have this great photo. Jeremy's posted it, and we should maybe post it when we do this. Like there's this great photo of Jeremy and I crossing the finish line. That's probably one of the most important pictures for me, because it's a thing that I never thought I could do in a million years, for most of my life. And so, and that's one of those things where, at the end of that event, you either decide you're a glutton for punishment, you're going to do more of that stuff, or you're going to hate it. And I chose the glutton for punishment route. And so, and the last thing I'll say on it is, and the reason why I wanted to make sure Sal hears this is, he still hasn't done one, and I'm getting ready to do my third. And so he talked us into, and then laid down the gauntlet and just decided he wasn't going to pick it up himself. I just picked it up for him. And Jeremy and I have since done 2, and we're getting ready to do our 3rd. And so we're still waiting on you, Sal, and we invite you to join us anytime you feel inclined.
I think he's got it in him. We just
I think so too.
Listen, he could do the Jeremy Mullins protocol, right? Like, hey, start training, 8 weeks out, you'll be okay.
Right.
Listen, for anyone that wants to do Ironman, I'll wrap it up with this today, and we'll get into, when I want to bring Dennis on multiple times. We were talking about this, and he didn't have the time today. And I wanted to keep this was a little longer than normal, but we'll bring him on for multiple times to finish this story out and have a different educational topic to go in it. But life got busy. Like in Sal's defense, like that's when First Form, like it took off like a rocket ship, right? And now it's still a rocket ship. There's a little bit more resources now than then. So I true heartedly believe he'll find some time in the next, 3 to 5 years to do one with us. But like it got so busy out here. I remember there was a certain point that I'm like, I have to start training. Right? Like I've got to start, I work out an hour a day, but I wasn't riding my bike. I wasn't running. And I remember just cranking up the mile. Okay, I got to get up to where I ride 100 miles before this event, right? I've got to go to where I run, 10 miles before this event. And then 6 weeks before the event, I started swimming. And it was actually pretty good. Like I swam okay, biked okay because Maryland's flat and I'm a decent biker as long as I'm getting some bike time in. And luckily enough for me, I took one for the team, being the good coach I am. With true honesty, I was just done. I got off the bike, and in my mind, which I didn't want to cross with you, like I wanted to finish, with you that day. But part of me was just so tired that I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to wait on him.
Yeah. And so I ran the first 7 miles to catch you while you were walking because you're a better biker than me. So you finished that first. And so you started hoofing it. And I was like, well, I got to catch him. So I literally off the bike, I was first 7 miles, I was just running and I finally got you. And then we sort of
death marched in.
Death marched in.
So, hey, if you're out there, if you can swim and you can bike okay, you can walk a marathon and finish an Ironman.
Yep.
I'm a study of one for that. Other than a little bit at the beginning when I first started running, and then my mind started turning into like, maybe I should just wait on him. I'm not feeling that good. So
yeah, and you could train for the full year ahead of time, or you could do the Jeremy route and just like take a couple weeks and just run a couple of times and wing it. You're good.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, training this. I'm already on the bike. It's
there you go.
Race is not till November. I'm already on the bike. I ran 3 times last week with an 8-mile run in there. I am training as of now. So,
I would love to hear. I can't wait to hear your training rides in that hot Florida sun now that you're down in Tallahassee.
Correct. The weather's much better. So maybe I'll PR this year when we go down there. So
all right.
Dennis, man, I appreciate you for coming on today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, not me reading on research and education and all that fun stuff, but I hope to bring you once again more guests on, kind of tell their story along the way, because I truly think that's how we continue to change lives. So because there's going to be a 40 to 45-year-old out there, father of 4, that's in that same boat as you, and this is going to resonate with him. Or there's people out there looking for the next thing, and you sign up for an Ironman. And I'll leave it with this. That photo means a lot to me, right? We went on and we had 10, 12 of us, that did Ironman Florida a few years later. And while there was more people there and it was cooler, it was bigger, I changed more lives. There was, once again, there's still something cool about your first, right? So that photo always means something to me. So I appreciate your time, brother. I love you. And I hope you have a great day.
Love you, man. Talk to you.
All right, guys. Until next time, we'll see you.